for anyone with even a moderate facility for independent thought. These are very strange times to be living in. On a daily basis, we are put under immense social and psychological pressure by institutions we once trusted to not only believe, but to repeat nonsensical and often self contradictory narratives. And if you make the mistake of reading something or listening to something and going, hey, something's not right about this, you face serious personal and often legal consequences. To an extent, this has always been true about South Africa. And as I am South African and have never lived anywhere else, that's how I'm going to limit the scope of this discussion. On paper, South Africa should be one of the most prosperous nations in the world. This country has immense natural beauty and diversity, as well as being rich in mineral resources. So, why is it that rates of poverty, violent crime, and hopelessness are among the highest in the entire world? Well, the fact is that black leaders simply do not govern with the long term best interests of their people in mind. For legal reasons, I must be absolutely clear that I am not making this claim on the basis of a belief in the racial inferiority or, for that matter, superiority of one group over another. What I'm about to argue is based simply on what I see occurring every day in South Africa and what I have seen occur over the course of my entire life. Let's take, for example, the system of broad based black economic empowerment. Outsiders or non South Africans would recognize that legislation more commonly under the title of affirmative action. And broad based black economic empowerment was instituted shortly after the ANC first took governmental power here with the vague and nebulous aim of redressing the economic and racial injustices of the past. Now, while that sounds good in theory, the idea that people who have been previously denied job opportunities and opportunities for education should be given preference so that they may succeed. In practice, what it has resulted in is a system of gross patronage in which people are chosen for positions of power not based on their personal capability of fulfilling those roles, but because of what outward identity they happen to have been born with, or even more commonly, what political connections they are fortunate enough to have access to. And so that is one of the major reasons why South Africa's economy continues to be stagnant, because the people who are actually capable of creating businesses and generating wealth are often held back because of how or what they happen to be born as. Another example of black leaders being unwilling to put aside their own greed and self-interest for the benefit of their people would be load shedding. I've talked about load shedding before, several times in fact, but in brief, load shedding was the necessary schedule of rolling blackouts across South Africa that lasted for well over a decade. Because through its incompetence and often outright sabotage, the ANC was unable to maintain our national electrical grid well enough to keep the lights on, and so to avert a complete system failure. For years, we had to live through extended periods of being without power. That had another disastrous downstream effect on our economy because, as you might imagine, it is very difficult to run large scale businesses when you can't rely on whether or not you'll actually have the electrical power you need to do so. Thankfully, load shedding has more or less come to an end, at least for the time being, because the ANC finally relinquished its pride and arrogance and has now allowed private industry to come in and generate extra power to supplement our grid. And it has also lost a lot of its ability to operate in an autocratic manner because in the most recent national election, the ANC lost its parliamentary majority and was forced to enter into what is publicly known as the Government of National Unity, which is comprised of the ANC and a number of its political opponents. I want to talk about something else that I see quite commonly, particularly from people who've never actually been to South Africa and are of, let's just say, a left leaning political perspective. There is a common narrative among these kinds of people that were it not for the presence of us evil white colonizers, the black people of Africa would all get along in peace and harmony. This is flatly false, and ironically enough, plays into the racist myth of the noble savage by stripping very complex cultures of their history and their personal differences and nuances. I'm here to tell you, as somebody who has lived in South Africa my entire life, that just because two groups of people may be black doesn't mean that they automatically have everything in common or that they're automatically going to get along. You only need to live here for a month and you'll see what I mean. The tribal divisions in South Africa, because we have multiple tribes, it's not just one homogenous group. Those differences are stark, and there are blood feuds going back generations. Not to mention the fact that when black people from other African nations come here seeking a better life, because as bad as South Africa is, it's still the best of all African nations. Foreigners are not treated with a warm welcome, and xenophobic violence is not by any means uncommon in this country. I have been fairly careful in what I've said in this video because, as I say, some of the things I'm talking about, if expressed in the wrong way, could very easily land me in legal trouble. Because unlike the United States, for example, freedom of speech is not a protected value in the South African Constitution. Nonetheless, I hope that this has been of some value to you, and for now, farewell.